Which form of craft, which is strictly prohibited by the government, brings them in $5.6 billion a year on tax revenue alone? Alcohol. And today I'm going to be talking specifically about wine and how to pick a proper bottle of wine. So the next time you go to the liquor store, which one are you going to buy? Deciding which bottle depends on three things. Number one, how much you're willing to spend, your taste preference, and why you're buying it based on what your situation is. So I've worked at Bottle King, which is a chain of liquor stores, for the past year and a half, so I've had plenty of time to get acquainted with the product, get to know it. Plus I've done extensive research for this project. So today I'm going to talk about how it's made, to start out, the health benefits that you get from drinking wine, the various types of wine between the whites and the reds and their descriptions, and also how to pick a proper bottle of wine based on, how much you're willing to spend and your price and your situation. So deciding which bottle to pick is depends on three things. Like I said, your taste preference, who you're buying it for, why you're buying it, and how much you're willing to spend. So first off, wine is made in a 5-step process, which I learned about on winefolly.com. First of all, in order to grow grapes, it has to be outside, preferably. People can actually make wine inside, but generally the bigger winemakers do it outside, preferably on a hill, which is slanted, facing the sun, so the maximum heat to prevent any frost damage, which could hamper the wine. So and then after that, you have to have a vine that's been growing for about a year, and once you have that, you can plant the grapes and let them grow for 1 to 3 years. And then after that, once their grapes are fully grown, you pick them out and get rid of any extra vegetation like the plants or the leaves that may have been growing on the vine. And then they're put into a large heated metal container, which it undergoes something called the fermentation process, where sugar turns to yeast and yeast turns to alcohol. Now, the warmer you let it sit, the drier the wine is going to be. So, for example, the red wines are going to be drier, so they heat it longer than the whites. Next, it's aged. It's put into oak or metal casks, where it's aged from anywhere between 4 months and 4 years, sometimes even longer. And after that, it's taken out and put into a filtration system, which gets rid of any unwanted sediment, any unwanted skins or seeds that may get into the bottle, which wouldn't be any good. And then it's ready to be bottled. It's stored, and then once they bottle it, they send it out to distributors, who send it out to stores like mine, where I sell it. So now that we've talked about how it's made, there are several health benefits you can get from drinking wine, especially in moderation, of course. This can, especially relating to the heart, it can help reduce risk of heart attack, stroke, coronary heart disease, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's disease even. It regulates your stress levels, your appetite, your digestion, and it can also be used as a disinfectant similar to rubbing alcohol. Now that I've established the background on where wine comes from, I'm going to talk about the various types of wine. First off, the difference between a white and a red is that a red is fermented with the grapes and the seeds, while the whites, actually, the grapes and the seeds are taken out before they're thrown into the filtration, before they're thrown into the fermentation process. So reds are going to be, more intense in flavor because they've got all those original qualities to it, and the whites are going to be easier to drink. So the base red wine that most people use as a comparison is the Cabernet Sauvignon. Personally, this is my favorite wine. It's going to be big, bold, intense flavors. It's dry, high in alcohol content, tends to be aged in oak barrels. It's mainly produced in Bordeaux, France, and California. After that, we have Zinfandel, which is about as dry as the Cabernet, but it's going to be a little more spicy and has zesty sort of flavors in it. This is produced primarily in California. Then we have Shiraz, which is a bold and spicy type of wine. Not as big and spicy as the Zinfandel is, but it's also going to be a little sweeter and less dry than Zinfandel. In Australia, it's called Shiraz, which is produced in Australia and France. In Australia, it's called Shiraz, and then in France, it's called Syrah, which is the same grape, though. And then Merlot, after this we have Merlot, which is softer and generally easier to drink. Merlot isn't too popular because there's not a whole lot going on in Merlot. It's kind of in between Cabernet and Pinot Noir. it's just a little boring, so it's not too popular. Now, one of the really popular wines is Pinot Noir. This is like a really light, sweet, easy to drink wine. It's a good wine to start drinking out on because it's easy to drink. And then okay, so after that, now that we're done with reds, I'm going to talk about the whites. The baseline for whites, similar to a Cabernet, would be the Chardonnay, which is dry, the driest white wine. It's oaky. It's got a buttery texture, and it's found in California and Burgundy, France. After that, we have the Sauvignon Blanc, which is a crisp and flavorful white wine, and it's got flavors of pear. It's found in New Zealand, California, all over France, pretty much everywhere. And then we have Rosé, which I learned about on vinepair.com. Now, Rosé is going to have a pink color to it. It's generally, it can range actually anywhere from really dry and flavorful to sweet and sugary. After that, we have Pinot Grigio. This is a really popular, easy to drink, light, refreshing summer wine, mainly found in Italy. Then we have Riesling, which is going to be crisper and probably a little easier to drink than the Pinot Grigio. But it's also sometimes the winemakers will add extra sugars into it to make it a little sweeter. Which leads me into the dessert wines, which includes Moscato and White Zinfandel, that type of stuff. The dessert wines are particularly sugary, and they sell really well among women because women like the sweeter stuff. Last but not least, I have champagne, or sparkling wine. Now, real champagne is found made in Champagne, France, because France is the way France's laws work. You can't call a champagne outside of the region that they actually make it in. That's actually their law. Then there's also it's popular around New Year's. It's actually also there's a knockoff called sparkling wine. People will call it. It's just not the same. It can be made anywhere else other than Champagne, France. So now that I've talked about how the wine tastes and where it comes from, I'm going to talk about how to pick a bottle. Which it can be, generally people spend about $10 in my store, and based on what winebusiness.com said, people do generally spend about $10. If you're looking to go out, people spend between $15 and $30 to impress people. And if you're looking to buy a gift, people spend, sometimes hundreds of dollars on a single bottle of wine. And then sometimes you'll find a cheap bottle of wine that can be really good, and then other times you can pay a lot for a bottle of wine and it'll taste not that good. So you gotta look out for reviews and recommendations and stuff like that. So yeah, now that I've talked about everything. I've talked about the background on wine, the various types, and I've told you which ones how to buy them based on the price. So deciding which bottle, again, depends on three things: your taste preference, why you're buying it, and how much you're willing to spend. But in the end, if you have a good bottle, it doesn't really matter how much you spend. You can find a really good one for really cheap and still have a good time. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for listening, guys. Have a good one.